Hey, Central, Pastor Matt here. Last week we started kind of an impromptu, how does your faith impact your politics kind of discussion. And last week we talked about when does life begin? And I thought I would continue that series over the next couple of weeks and just hit some topics that our culture talks about. And today I thought we would talk a little bit about marriage. Now, before we get started, one of the things that I would say is important for you to decide when you look at any of these topics we're going to talk about is, do you want to do things God's way, or do you want to do things your own way? Because if you want to do things God's way, then you have to know what God says about it. You have to spend time in His Word, and you have to spend time digging in and saying, okay, so what does God have to say about when does life begin? What does God have to say about marriage and those kind of things? If you're not interested in what God has to say about it, then you probably aren't going to be interested in what I have to say about it. So let me just start off with that. But if you want to know what God has to say about marriage, it's pretty simple. In Genesis chapter 2, after we're told that God, He creates the universe and He makes man in His image, that He says the one thing that God says day after day is it's good, it's very good when He's creating this world that we live in. But He does say it's not good for the man to be alone. And He said, I'm going to make a helpmate suitable to him. And so he forms all of the creatures of the earth, brings them to the man to see what the man's going to call them. And He names all of the creatures, but there's not anyone that's found that fits the man, that's a suitable helpmate for him. And so God causes a deep sleep to fall upon the man. The man falls asleep, and God takes a rib from his side, and He fashions a woman. And He brings her to the man, and the man says, wow, this is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman because she was taken out of man. And finally, there's someone who fits man that God says, this is now going to be your wife. Moses makes this statement. He says, for this cause a man shall leave his father and his mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall be one flesh. Jesus picks up on this in the Gospels, and He says, what God has brought together, let no man break asunder. And when Paul talks about marriage in Ephesians chapter 5, he talks about marriage as being this picture of the relationship between Jesus and the church. That marriage is a forever covenant, not a contract, but a covenant between a man and a woman where they say before God and before witnesses that I'm going to love you no matter what. And in that moment, when they make that covenant, it is till death do them part. Now, in our culture, that's kind of a weird thing to do, because in our culture, we are influenced by all kinds of things that come from the media. One of my favorite things is to think about a Disney movie. And in every Disney movie, what do you have? You have the princess who is extremely beautiful, and there's some kind of backstory with a wicked stepmother or whatever, but there's a princess in the story who's looking for her Prince Charming. And there's a Prince Charming who's trying to find the damsel in distress, and by the end of the story, you know how it goes. They lived happily ever after. And so in our culture, what people are looking for is the happily ever after. They think that if they find just the right person, if they get just the right combination, then they'll have the happily ever after. But the problem is the happily ever after, because of sin, never happens on its own. And the only way to have a marriage that's lasting, the only way to have a marriage that is going to bring true happiness, because happiness will only come with holiness, is to have Jesus at the center of that marriage, is to have one that's built on a common faith and a common groundwork. In this country, there's a difference between what's biblical and what's legal. There are lots of things in this country that are legal that I would say are actually anti-biblical. And in marriage, when it comes to marriage now, because the definition legally has changed, it's no longer a biblical definition, it's a secular definition. And so when you think about marriage and you think about your faith, how you approach your faith, and it comes to the question of marriage, you should always say, what does the Bible have to say about this? One man, one woman for life. That's what the Bible has to say. Well, that's it for this week. Hopefully you guys are having a great week, being safe. We look forward to seeing you this weekend at church, whether that's online at 9:30 on Sunday morning, or Sunday night, Sunday evening here at 5 o'clock on campus, where we get to worship together in person, and can't wait to see you then. Hey Central, Pastor Matt here. Hey, if you have any questions on the topics that we've been covering so far, feel free to send us an email at connect@centralchristian.org. The purpose of these is just to give you a practical biblical worldview, and so we want to do that as best we can. Again, connect@centralchristian.org. We'll talk to you soon.